Good morning. My name is Matthew R. Kearns, and I serve as the Associate Director of Member and Alumni Relations for Focus St. Louis. Focus St. Louis is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to educate leaders, connect leaders, and facilitate important conversations for St. Louis and our surrounding region. Today is our 6th sneak peek into our new series, Focus, Elevate Leadership, a continuing education program designed to fulfill our purpose of continuing to inspire and equip leaders. These professional development courses will immerse participants in breakthrough thinking in order to grow their confidence, knowledge, and networks. Today's topic, You're Hired, Mastering the Job Search During a Pandemic. Our guest, the amazing Bernie Frazier, author of Your Success is in You, empowering and equipping you to create your best career ever. Bernie Frazier, SPHR, is an author, speaker, career coach, strategist, and talent acquisition expert whose mission is to help people overcome barriers to great success. Bernie has shared as a keynote speaker for numerous corporations and organizations and has coached clients globally from C-suite executives to individual contributors. Bernie has also served as the career coach on KSDK's Today in St. Louis, shared timeless job tips on Sirius XM Radio and at the Big 550, KTRS. She's also been profiled in the St. Louis Business Journal and is a contributing writer for Thrive Global. As Bernie delivers content today, she requests that you ask questions by using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We will field your questions at the end of her presentation. Bernie will try to make it to everyone's question, but if she's unable to answer yours, you can email me at matthewk@focus-stl.org, and I will talk with her and reply with your answer. Please turn all microphones off. Focus St. Louis would like to thank lead sponsor Citi and presenting sponsor Daugherty Business Solutions for this opportunity. And now, without further ado, please welcome Bernie Frazier.
Thank you, Matthew. Hello, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be with you all today. I love talking about job search and careers. I know certainly our circumstances have changed over the last few months, and I'm hoping that this information will provide some really good value for each of you all who are tuning in, and I thank you for being here today. I wanted to share a couple of things. First of all, I'm sure that, come January 1 of this year, we were celebrating, many people were identifying or locking in or fine-tuning their New Year's resolutions. They had all of these great plans. We were going to travel and lose weight and start new jobs and get promoted and win the lottery and everything else that we had planned for this year. And then all of a sudden, we have a little bug come in and just wreck all of our plans in so many instances. And I would imagine that all of you all, or at least most of you like me, never ever had any idea that by this time we would be dealing with all of the challenges that we're not now dealing with, and not just locally or regionally or even nationally, but on a global scale with the pandemic that we're all facing right now. And it has certainly caused many of us to change our plans. Matthew and I were just speaking right before this in terms of how we're all having to pivot in order to move forward and be successful and continue our growth and development and all the things that we want to achieve. But I wanted to, this pandemic has, again, it has just transformed everything we're doing right now. And one of the things that I have been tracking over the last 8 weeks is the unemployment, like many of you all have. And they just came out with the numbers yesterday, and they mentioned how as of last week, May 9th, 36.5 million new unemployment claims have been filed. And, each week these numbers have continued to increase. If there's any good news with this, they've increased at smaller increments for the last 4 or 5 weeks. But again, we're looking at some record numbers here. And what this really means is the unemployment stands at as much as 25%. Now, the official number that's reported is around 15%, but that's not necessarily the real unemployment number, because there are a lot of people who still have not been able to file. There were about 7 million people prior to 8 weeks ago who were unemployed, and then there were those who were underemployed and some who had given up. So again, we are seeing numbers that we have not seen since the Great Depression of the 1930s. But I did not come here to share with you all a bunch of doom and gloom, because there really is some good news with everything that's happening right now. And what that good news is there are companies that are still hiring. And I know that because I do coaching. And in the last 8 weeks, I've had 5 clients get hired into new jobs, including one who literally just accepted an offer this Wednesday. And I've had 4 personal friends accept offers. And if any of you all are on LinkedIn, and I'm sure most, if not all of you are, I would imagine that you're like me. When you log in, you see these notifications that says, congratulate XYZ person who just started a new job. And so when you think about things like that, please keep that in mind, that even though we're facing some really challenging, really difficult times, there are companies still out here hiring, and they are looking for talent. So here's the question. For those companies who are looking for talent, and for those of you who have either lost your job, or you are concerned about losing your job, or you may have even received notification that a job loss is coming, how do you prepare for that? How do you make sure that you're ready so that when the opportunities come that you want, you can be the one that hears the words, "You're hired"? So I unfortunately don't have an extended amount of time today, but I wanted to share 4 key principles with you that I think if you can start to incorporate these into what you're doing, this will certainly help you get closer to getting that offer. So the first point that I want to share, and this is one that I don't often hear people think about, but I want to share this one going back to the almost 25 years of recruiting talent to different companies and things that I would see in candidates. So my first point that I want to share is, if you get laid off, if you have the financial capacity and the time, take a little bit of time to detox. And what I mean by that is, when you've been laid off, whether you were expecting it, and sometimes whether you were hoping for it, it's still a change. And for some people, it's not a good change. Whether the layoff wasn't handled in the most ideal way, or maybe it was, but you just didn't see it coming. Or you may have been with your company for 20, 25 years, and all of a sudden you've got to make this switch. How do you do that? And so usually when these type of situations occur, it brings about a whole bunch of emotions. You can go from happy to sad to angry to scared to loss of confidence to on top of the world. And sometimes you can have all of these emotions in the same day, sometimes the same hour. But nevertheless, it's so important that you take time to just kind of mentally and emotionally transition before you really start diving into a job search. And again, the reason why I say this is because if you can imagine, in almost 25 years of recruiting talent to different companies, how many thousands of people I interacted with, I could tell when people had not resolved some of whatever they had coming from that last company. Because if I mentioned that company, they would almost start biting nails, or you could see it in their facial expressions, and you could tell they were still angry or they were still frustrated. And one of the things that's so important for you to understand is, when a company is hiring, the last thing that they want to do is hire someone who they perceive as being angry, because they're afraid you're going to bring that into their organization, and that's just not something they want. So again, whether it's, if you have the latitude to take a few weeks off, great. Take a few weeks off and relax, or, I guess we can't socialize quite as much as we could before, but try to get out and, maybe you can take some walks or something like that, just to clear your head so that you're ready for the job search, because that is a work and it's a process, and certainly for the next job that you get. So again, just take that time to detox. And even if you can just take a couple of days, that will help you, but really try to get yourself to a point of transitioning so that you're ready for the next chapter. So the second point that I want to share with you revolves around the resume. And there are a couple of key things here. I could share, 50 things, but I wanted to hit some things that I feel are really key, just in considering the thousands and thousands of resumes that I've seen over the years. And the first point that I want to share, which is probably the most important point that I can share, is relevant. You want to make sure that your resume is relevant for the types of jobs you're pursuing. And what I mean is, as an employer, Employers and recruiters, they're limited, their time is stretched. So when a recruiter is looking at a resume, they're looking for key pieces of information, and they're looking for information that's related to the job they're trying to fill. And if they don't see that because you have a lot of stuff located in your resume, they may put your resume aside and decide that you're not qualified for the position. But if you are really finding ways to highlight the work that you've done, the skills that you've acquired, maybe the licenses and certifications that you have that are relevant to that job, you are much more likely to receive a phone call from that employer, because now you're showing them that these are the 8 things that you're looking for, and here's how my skills and my abilities line up with that. So that if you don't remember anything else about doing a resume, making it relevant is the most important thing you can do. The second point that I want to share about resumes, I call this one Think Monopoly. And I would imagine most, if not all of you, have played Monopoly at least once when you were a child. And if you think back to when you played, the most important real estate on the board were the ones that you can see in blue, Boardwalk and Park Place. They cost the most, but they yielded the most in terms of revenue. And so when you think about your resume, I want you to ask yourself, what is the most important real estate on my resume? And as you're thinking about that, I'm going to help you and I'll share the answer. It's the top half of page 1. And that's if you have a 1 or even a 2-page resume. The most important real estate is that top half, and maybe even the top third. And let me tell you why. There's an organization called the Ladders. Some of you may have heard of it, some may not, but they're a job matching service, and I would guess they've been around maybe about 15 years or so. But they did a study in 2012, and they tracked 30 recruiters for 10 weeks because they wanted to understand, how do recruiters look at resumes? What are they looking at? Where do their eyes linger? And at the end of this study, as you can imagine, they had a lot of different data points. But the one that's gotten the most notoriety and the one that's been discussed the most is how much time recruiters spend looking at a resume. And I have to be honest with you, I did my own guess, and I was shocked to see what those results were. But what they found out was, on average, a recruiter spends 6 seconds looking at a resume. Now think about that, 6 seconds. And when I've worked with clients and I share this point with them, I often would time them with their resume to see how far down they would get in reading if they only had 6 seconds. And understand, this is looking at their own resume, which they are the most familiar with. So imagine looking at a resume and it's the first time you've seen it. The furthest down they got was to the halfway point of page 1. And so my point in that is, again, it goes back to that relevance. If you aren't loading the top half of your resume, or the top half of page 1 with really strong, really good information, there's a good chance that that employer, that recruiter may not look at the rest of your information. So you have to think about, how do I show them my strongest information in this top half? Because if they look at that and if they like what they see, one of 2 things will happen. Either they will continue to read the rest of it and see the other work and the other achievements that you've had, or they will put your resume aside in a small pile that they plan on coming back to. Either one is a good scenario. So you really want to think Monopoly as you are crafting your resume, and how do I front load that upper half of my resume with my best work, my most relevant work. And then the third point that I wanted to share about resumes is accomplishments, not duties. And this is one that I see a lot of people do when it comes down to the professional experience area, which you can see just this sample here on the image. They will put all of the great duties that they've had. You know, I've done this, I did this, I worked on this, I did this, but they don't list what the accomplishment was. And an employer wants to see, yes, they want to understand, what was the gist of the work that you did? What was the scope of your work? You know, you led a team of 11, you were responsible for this, and you handled that. But what they are most interested in is, what did you accomplish in that work? How did you transform that job description? Because in essence, when you're just listing the duties, really what you're showing me is your job description. But I want to know, how did you, being in that role, affect it for the good? So you can start to list things like, I led this initiative and had the responsibility of coordinating this, which led to, and then you put a result. And think of it like this. Oftentimes what an employer is looking for is, how did you make money? How did you save money? How did you save time? How did you solve a problem? So those are so important to be able to show those. And if you can quantify it, it's even better, because it helps for a person to understand the real impact of it. And if you've even won some type of prestigious award or a contest, listing things like that are important too, because if you win an award, that's a sign to the reader that you did some exceptional work. And so again, it's so important to remember that, to look at your resume and figure out how you can list some of the duties in there so that the person understands the scope of the work, but then show, here's what I accomplished in those duties. So again, 3 key things to remember about the resume, that if you can transform or enhance your resume in this manner, it will really, really strengthen it and make it stand out amongst the competition. So the next area I want to talk about is virtual networking, because obviously so much has gone to virtual now, as we're trying to create the safe spaces and the safe distances with everyone. And so I've had the question, okay, I can't meet with people, so what do I do? And there are certainly some things that you can do when it comes to networking that are still effective, and sometimes even more effective than actually trying to meet in person. So the first point that I want to share is, begin with your current network, because networking in its easiest form of defining is nothing more than building relationships. That's really all networking is. And I know a lot of times people think of networking as going to a big hall where there are 200 or 300 or 400 people. They have a stack of business cards that they're hoping to pass out, and really hoping to meet that one person that can open up the door of opportunity for everything for you. And then you collect all of these cards, you go home, the next day you get up, and most of them, you don't remember who was who, what you talked about, and pretty soon you go, this was such a waste of time. You can network like that, and there are ways you can maximize those opportunities, but even when we're doing close distancing, I'm still not a believer that that is ideal networking. The best way is to build those relationships and start with the people you already know, your family members, your friends, maybe current colleagues, but certainly former colleagues, former bosses, former employees. Work with those people, especially if you know people that work in companies that you're targeting or industries that you're targeting. Why not reach out to them? Let them know you're looking, let them know what you're looking for, and ask them, about their company. It's a great way to get good intelligence, to find out about the culture. How do they pay? What's the dynamic like right now? How do they treat their employees? What are the growth opportunities? And you can get so much good information. But the other thing too is, you may be able to give your resume to that person because they know the HR recruiter, or they have a really good contact and they know the hiring manager for the position. Now you can bypass all of the other people who've applied and get to the hiring manager or to that recruiter and be right there front and center on their desk. So again, it's so important that you start with the people that you already know. The next point that I want to share is, you've got to be active on social media. And I know there are people that still cringe at this. And I'll be honest, I am fairly active, and I have my moments where I go, I'm just so tired. I don't have anything to say. I don't feel like sharing. And sometimes you've got to push yourself if you're not one of those people who loves it and you're already active. But it's so important that you do that. And I have LinkedIn and Twitter there with the little arrow, and I'll talk about the connection between those two in a minute. But, for instance, with LinkedIn is probably the most important social media site from a professional standpoint. And so it's really critical that you are out there and active on LinkedIn, because employers will look to see, oh, what kind of comments do you make? What types of posts do you put out there? Who are you interacting with? And they also will look at your profile. And you want to make sure that you are out there, that you're active, putting good content out there, letting people know, for one, that you're looking for a job. Because if you don't let people know, most people won't know, and you could miss out on an opportunity. So it's so important that you are connecting with people, building those relationships, again, even through social media, that can help open doors of opportunity for you. So now, to this LinkedIn Twitter connection, I've run into a lot of people that will have a LinkedIn profile and they may or may not have a Twitter account, but really don't do a lot with it. I'm here to encourage you to use Twitter. A lot of people don't use Twitter for their job search, and they're missing out, because within LinkedIn, which is probably the biggest, certainly the biggest professional social media site, but one of the most critical for a job search. With LinkedIn, unless you have a paid account, you're not able to send messages to anyone outside of the current network or connections that you have. And even with some of your current connections, if they have their messages locked down, you still cannot send them a message. So that could limit your interactions and your opportunities with those people. But let's say you find an opportunity with an organization, you go and search people who maybe work there now, you find someone who looks like either they could be the recruiter for that position or the hiring manager, but you can't get to them. What you can do is go to Twitter, see if they have a Twitter account, and if so, you can direct message them via Twitter. And I would also say, if it's a recruiter, start following them on Twitter, because a lot of recruiters will tweet their jobs. So you can start to follow them. You'll see the notifications about their jobs. And if you see one that you like, they'll always put a link. You click on the link, apply to the job, and then you come back to Twitter and you direct message that person. And it's a great way to use these, play them off of one another. So again, with social media, there are a number of different ways you can take advantage of it to help you with the job search. And that's just one way that you can use those two together. The third point that I wanted to share, and I said it very quickly in the last point, and that is to max out your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn is so important to a job search nowadays. And the reason why, because recruiters use LinkedIn a lot. They are out there searching, they are out there canvassing for hours, trying to find talent to fill their jobs. But if you have an incomplete LinkedIn profile, some of the information that may cause you to stand out in a good way with an employer will be missed because you don't have it out there. So there are some key things that you should have in your LinkedIn profile. The first one is to check your privacy and settings to make sure you're not set to private so that people can't even see your profile. So you could fill it up with great information, but if it's set to private, no one can see it. So you want to make sure your settings are done properly so that you don't miss out on those connections and those opportunities. The second thing is make sure you have a good picture. And I know there are some people, they don't like to take pictures. I'm one of them. But it's one of those things, it's a necessary evil. And a lot of times I equate a job search to dating. And think about it like this. If you were to go on a dating site, would you ever reach out to someone who did not post a picture? Probably not. I know I wouldn't. And LinkedIn in some ways is about the same. And they've done their own studies. And what they have noticed is people that have a profile picture out there, they are about 20 times more likely to have a message sent to them. And so it's so important that you put a picture, and it needs to be one that's more professional. You know, I always encourage people to remember, it's not Facebook, it's not Instagram, it's not some of the other fun sites. This is a professional site. So you really want a nice headshot that's clear. You know, you're smiling, because if you smile, you're more engaging that way. And so it's so important that you put a profile picture in there. The next is to build out your headline. Because when you do a search for, maybe you put in keywords, what it will show you of the list of people that comes up is very little. But one of the things you will see is that 120 characters in the headline. So you don't just want to list your job title. but how did you, again, make money, solve a problem, save time for an organization? And how can you quickly explain that in a way that would entice someone to click on your profile? So it's so important to do that. And some other sections that you want to make sure you build out is your about section. This is more of a free-flowing narrative where you can really highlight some of your accomplishments and some of your strengths. So you want to include that information as well as contact information. Maybe put a phone number or an email address so you can be reached easily. But you want to, of course, put out, fill in your employment, your education. If you can get recommendations, those are really good to have as well because they serve as online references for you, as well as even some skills. Highlight your skills because those can be searched out with keywords and that will help you to show up higher in a search. So again, those are some of the things you can do to build out your LinkedIn profile, but so important that you do that. The last point really quickly too, from a virtual networking standpoint, is to start maybe a layoff support group, a COVID-19 layoff support group. And maybe you can draw others who are laid off to where you all can share information. Everyone came from a company, share those insights, and that you may be able to help one another, but because you are the one organizing it, you're seen as more of a leader, and you never know who might be in this group who could then pass your information on to others. Start a blog or podcast with your expertise. If you are a chef, why not do something on cooking? If you are an accountant, maybe this is a great time to give people tips on how they can manage their money right now. So whatever your expertise is, take advantage of some of the mediums that are out here that will give you greater exposure so that the right people will see what you're doing. So with the few minutes that I have left, I wanted to talk a little bit about the virtual interview because we all know that we're doing the virtual interviewing now. And companies have been doing this for a few years now, but they're really ramping up, as you can imagine right now, to do some safe distancing, but still be able to conduct these interviews. So a few key things to remember when you are doing the virtual interview. The first one is you have to remember it's still an interview. So all of the preparation you would do if you were driving to a location and going in to meet with people in person, you do the same prep, because you're still going to be evaluated based upon almost identical, if not identical criteria. So you want to make sure you're doing the research on the company or the industry and the dynamics, knowing their products and services, and preparing and practicing answers to questions. So again, it's still an interview, so never lose sight of that fact that it is just as serious, even though it's virtual. The second point I wanted to share, this one I think is probably obvious to most people. You want to select your space wisely because again, I can see you. So you want to think about, finding a place where you can have privacy, where it's quiet. And I know it's a lot more of a challenge if you have younger children, if you have pets, but if you can sneak off to a place where you can close a door and maybe even lock it so that it's quiet and it will allow you to focus, you will really do yourself good for your interviewing because now there aren't any distractions for you. Think about your background setting. You don't have to have a sterile wall where, you look like there's absolutely nothing else around you, but you don't want to have things that are so distracting that your interviewer is paying more attention to what's behind you than paying attention to you and what you're saying. So, if you have some books or if you have a plant or even a picture, that's fine, but just consider what it is. You want to avoid things that maybe, create a political charge, things that are risque, or something that's just so unusual that, again, it would draw me away from you. So just consider your space and make sure that you surround it with things that will reinforce you are the right person for the job. The third point that I wanted to share, this is one that I think people often don't realize, but it's so important. And that is look at the camera. If you have a laptop camera or on your cell phone, look at where, you take the pictures, your lens, not the screen. And the temptation is to look at the screen because now you're looking right at the person. But here's what you have to remember. If you are interviewing in person, an interview basic is to make good eye contact. Well, if you're doing a virtual interview and you're at a laptop, if you're looking at the screen to the person interviewing you, you're looking away from them. Now they'll understand that you're looking at them at the screen, but it's just a subtle thing that can make a difference. So you want to practice, again, this goes back to practicing, practice looking at the camera when you're responding. When they're asking questions, practice looking at them in the camera. Now, there's nothing wrong with glancing down to kind of gauge their facial expression or body language, but you don't want to linger there. You really want to give them the illusion that you're looking at them and making that good eye contact. So it's so important to remember that, and a lot of people don't realize that. And the last point that I wanted to share was, if possible, schedule any interviewing that you're doing during your peak hours. And what I mean by that, there are some people who are morning people, and then there are those of us who are not. And so if you're the type of person that at 5:30, 6 o'clock, you are up and you are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, then if you can schedule your interviews at 8 a.m. or 8:30, that's probably going to be better for you, because your energy is better, your focus will be better, you'll show up in your best. Whereas if you try to schedule something at 2 p.m., your energy is probably going to be lower and you won't show up at your best. And I am just of the advantage that if you're working from home, which so many of us are now, or if you're interviewing from home, there are so many temptations to pull at you that scheduling during your peak hours is probably going to be even more important, because there are things that can pull you away, certainly during your off-peak hours. So that's just something to remember too, that a lot of people, I don't think they often think about. So those are the tips that I wanted to share. I hope that you all have gotten some really good nuggets out of these and can pull a few things out of this that will help you. I totally wish you all tremendous success. I hope that everyone watching is still working and not at the point of job loss. But if you are, like I said, if you can incorporate these things into your job search, they will surely help you out. So I truly thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I would love to take those, and I appreciate you being here.
It's really, really insightful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing some time with us today. I'm going to make sure that I get that slide deck from you, Bernie. You turn your camera back on so that I can share the slide deck with everybody, okay?
Absolutely.
I do have some questions for you from our audience, and if you all have additional questions, go ahead and put them in the question box. Bernie, you can flip your camera back on so we can see you. Question number one is, if I'm going to take a break, because I have the time, I lost my job and I'm going to take a break, what is the proposed time of that break? What do you think is the right amount of time for me to get some distance from that last job and be ready to start searching for the next one?
That's a good question. I don't know if there really is a prescribed amount of time that's ideal. I really think it depends on the person. And I'll be honest with you, there are times when people come out of a job loss and they are going, oh, thank God, I was tired of it. I was ready to go. And so they probably don't need much of a break.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are others where it's devastating for them. And, if it's the case for you like that, then I would say you need longer. It could be anywhere. For some people, it may be a week or two. For some people, it might be 2 months. And I'll give you an example. I have a new client, and she and I met for the second time yesterday. So in our first session, I had given her a homework assignment. When we got together yesterday, I could just see the look on her face. And I said, so did you get your work done? And she said, honestly, Bernie, I didn't. And I went, really? And I said, what's going on? I'm seeing something here. She had been with her company 20 years and enjoyed it. Yeah. And so she went, I just don't think I'm ready. She said, and this is not me. I'm usually more focused. I'm on task. I get it done. She said, I just said, you know what? Don't say another word. I said, let's wait. And she said, and I'm fine. Financially, she's fine. She said, I could go a year and I'm good. I said, I tell you what, let's take a break. And by the time we finished, we rescheduled, and we're not meeting again until June 3rd. And I told her even then, I said, we'll do a check-in. If you're ready to go, then we'll go. If not, we'll push it back longer. And so again, it really depends on the person. You have to kind of know you. I would say I probably would try to keep it under a couple of months, depending. I only say that because we just don't know how much more challenging things are going to get. And so certainly keep a pulse on what's happening, but keep a pulse on yourself and are you ready? Because doing a job search is a job. And so you have to be ready for that job. And then once you get a job, you then have to be ready to go for that one. So again, I wish I had an exact answer, but it really depends.
Is it wise to take unemployment if you're laid off or furloughed?
Absolutely. Particularly if you need the money, if it will help. And not only that, you know, I know people will say it's an entitlement and you know, people have their opinions on it and I respect both sides, but I always look at it like this: in your paycheck, you paid into unemployment.
Hmm.
Did that so that if the need ever came, it would be there for you. And if it's one of those where it would really help you right now, then I would encourage you to do it. I say, you know, to keep the food in the fridge and keep the lights on, you do what you have to do. And if filing for unemployment because you qualify for it is one of those things that will help, then I say absolutely do it.
If you reach out to a recruiter via Twitter or LinkedIn and they don't respond, what is the recommendation regarding following up? Should you send another message? If so, how long should you wait?
Yeah. Oh goodness, that's always the challenge, right? It's like, okay, I don't want to be a pest, but I don't want them to lose sight of me. I totally understand. I would say, you know, you don't want to do it every day. You know, maybe for the first few times it's once a week. You know, see what kind of response you get, but change it up a little bit too. And I'll give you a tip. If I had had a lot more time, I could have shared this when it comes to networking. I received a LinkedIn message. It was February of 2014. I still have the message. And this was probably to this date, the most amazing message I ever received from anyone on LinkedIn. And what she did, she introduced herself. She thanked me for being a connection. And she was clear about what she wanted. She said, I am looking for a job and I would appreciate your assistance. She said, but first, I'd like to find out how can I help you? And she started listing, you know, her things that she was good at. You know, she said, I'm good at managing projects. I've managed budgets of at least $1 million. I'm a good writer. I am also fluent in Spanish. And she listed all of these things. She said, do you have a deadline maybe you're struggling to meet? Do you have a project that maybe I can provide you some assistance with? She said, if so, I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss to see how I can help you. She said, and in return, I would appreciate your guidance regarding a career, job search, tips, etc. She said, but first, how can I help you? And I mean, my jaw dropped. I went, I've never had anybody reach out like that. And I picked up the phone and I called her immediately. And so a lot of times you have to realize people who are reaching out, they have so many people reaching out for them. So try a different approach. And do you have something that you could offer that may help that person? I have a client who he just accepted a job offer this Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And we were talking, I said, now refresh my memory again, how this came about. And what he did, he said, I took a tip that you gave me. He said he had been in contact with a recruiter at a bank. He had interest in working for another bank. The first recruiter, he wasn't a fit for their job. And he said, I asked her, do you happen to know anyone that works over at this bank? And she said, actually, I do. She said, you might be a good fit for them. She said, I'll send your resume over. Here's who you can contact. He said, so I reached out to the lady on LinkedIn twice. She didn't respond. He said, the third time I reached out and said, hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you to find out about jobs you're recruiting for. I may know some people that I can refer. She responded, and the rest was history. He ended up getting a job with that company.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Do you recommend general LinkedIn posting, announcing your post-layoff job search? And if so, any suggestions on wording? How do you put that news out there into the world?
Good question. I would say, you know, it's not something that you want every post to say that, because that can come across as desperate. But absolutely, you want to let people know, but start to highlight the benefit of hiring you. And a lot of times people will approach it, I'm looking for this, I want this, I need this. And companies, their first priority is not your need, it's their need. So what you can start to do is, you know, highlight things that you've achieved. How did you, come up with an approach that saved, turned the process from 7 steps to 2 steps? It went from 4 days to 30 minutes. And talk about how you are an efficiency master. I'm making up this term, but you put things out there. Maybe you find an article that helps to underscore some work that you've done. Share that article and put a little blurb about, in my last assignment, I was able to do something similar, which yielded XYZ results.
I like the term efficiency master. I think you should coin it. Done.
Yeah, I'm going to trademark that.
Yeah, there you go. Yes. So if I get laid off, what are your thoughts about following my heart and my passions versus following my previous skill set and my job history during this time?
Oh, I love that, because I know there are people who are at that crossroads right now. Mm-hmm. I always say with questions like this, and the person that asks is probably not going to like my answer, but I say it depends. But it really does. One, for the area that you have passion in, how do your skills line up for that right now? Because you may have a passion for it, but you have no experience. And so trying to make that transition right now could be harder than it may have been 6 months ago even. So you've got to start to identify, do I have transferable skills? Do I have direct skills that are easily seen as being an asset for that type of work? So that's one of the things to consider. Another is, how long can you withstand the amount of time it might take to make the transition? Whether it's looking at your finances, whether it's just your psyche, how long can you withstand that? Because a lot of times making a transition into the passion area, depending on whether it's a short hop or a quantum leap, it can take some time. So you really got to gauge, your personal situation of whether you can withstand that or not. But the other thing to consider too is, what is the work, or maybe the industry that you now want to pursue, has it been really hard hit with this pandemic? If so, if it's a declining industry right now, probably not somewhere that you'd want to go, because it's going to be really hard to get in. Or are they in growth mode to where they are needing people, and could that make a difference as well?
Yeah. What are your feelings about applying online and figuring out the algorithms of the applicant tracking systems? If you're super qualified for the job and applying to it, but you can't seem to get past the computer scanners.
If you can figure out the algorithms, first I say write the book.
That's why I was like, wow, that's a fascinating question, right?
Yeah, if you write the book, you won't need the job, trust me. You can sell the book. But that's the importance of networking. Because what I have seen time and time and time again is people want the safety. Safety right now is important, but they want the ease of sitting at the computer with the mouse, and they're just going from site to site, just submitting their information. You can do that, and you're going to have to do that. That should be part of the job search process, but that should be a smaller percentage. The largest percentage of your time should be networking. And here's why. When I was in corporate recruiting, and anyone in recruiting, most companies use those applicant tracking systems to track jobs and to track candidates. So let's say I post a job, I get 200 applicants, now maybe 275. You are applicant number 141, but I am looking for a candidate slate of 8 that I can screen, get down to 3 or 4 to present to my hiring manager. So I find my candidate slate of 8 in the first 93. But remember, you're number 141. Now, you may be absolutely perfect for the job, but I never saw you. And so you'll walk away thinking, well, what's wrong with me? Why is no one calling me? I have everything they're looking for, but I'm not getting the calls. That could be why, because you're putting most of your effort into that application, and you do have to apply, but you've got to network. You've got to get connected, because if you get your network involved, now it's not just you looking for a job, but you have, 10, 15, 20 other people whose eyes and ears are open on your behalf. They will hear about jobs and opportunities that you won't. They can make you aware of them. They can get your information and pass them on again to the hiring manager, to the recruiter. So now all of a sudden you may end up doing a phone interview before you've ever applied for the job. And that's why it's so important to incorporate networking into the search. and make it a big part.
So there are two final questions here. One, just building on that, in this time where we are physically and socially distanced from each other, how do you propose networking?
Well, it's like I was saying, with LinkedIn, some of it is finding out who do you need to network with. Again, I am a huge proponent of being strategic with your job search, strategic with your career. And with your job search, it's not just about being a shotgun where you pull a trigger and you spray everywhere. You need to figure out, how do I be a laser with this? So you've got to start to be clear on what types of opportunities am I looking for from a functional standpoint. Okay, I want to go into accounting. I want to be an accounting supervisor. Okay, do I have certain industries that I'm interested in? Maybe you have 2 or 3. Okay, what companies are in this industry? All right, what companies are in my city that have opportunities? So now you've got the type of job, the companies. Now you need to start to do your homework, and that's when you start using your network of people you already know. Hey, do you know anyone that works at Centene? Do you know anyone that works at Anheuser-Busch InBev? Do you know anyone that works at Emerson? Really? Can you connect me with them? Or can you reach out to them and ask them these 3 questions? So now you're starting to get information, and would they be willing to have a conversation with me? So you do a 15-minute conversation. Now you're building a relationship, and you always ask them, how can I help you as well? But as you're building that relationship, they'll go, you know what? I have a friend that works over in HR. I'll reach out to her tomorrow. Let me see what I can find out for you, and I'll follow up with you by the end of the day. That can take you much further than applying for 75 jobs. Yep. Is being that laser and really being targeted in your search and figuring out how to connect with people. And again, people always want to, you can do the cold reach out via LinkedIn, and there's nothing wrong with that, but start with the people you already know. Those are warm leads. And I'll give you another tip on reaching out to people. Oftentimes I'll tell people, don't snub the help. And what I mean by that, everyone wants to get to the executive. Oh, I want to get to that vice president, the CEO. Here's what you have to understand, and especially in large organizations, everyone wants to get to the CEO. That's why he puts layers and layers of buffers between you and the public. Right. Instead of trying to get to the vice president of the department, why don't you get to his administrative assistant? She's the one that's controlling his calendar and his emails. You build a relationship with her, she'll tell you how to get to him, or she'll get you to that person. But people often will snub the little people, who I always say are really the big people in disguise.
That's great. Our final question today is, if I'm working with several technical recruiters who do contract corporate placements, in this scenario, is it appropriate to contact the hiring company directly?
If you are working with a recruiter, I'll call it a headhunter, you really want to work with that headhunter, because you have to understand at that point, they have better inroads than you do to that company. And if you've started working with them and then you bypass them, you're burning a bridge. And they will communicate what you're doing to the company, and the company may not look favorably upon that. Because you're not following a proper protocol or a chain of command. And so the way a company could interpret that is, if you do that now, how would you operate if you got inside of our company? Yeah. And so you really don't want to burn those bridges, and you want to establish and keep those relationships, because again, you may be interviewing with through an agency for one company. It doesn't mean you're going to get hired. So if you don't get hired and you burn the bridge with the agency, they probably will not work with you. So then you've really, you've shortchanged yourself.
So Bernie, if I want to find you because I want your services for coaching or resume or helping me build my LinkedIn, how do I do that?
Oh, absolutely. You can reach me either directly. My email address is Bernie, and I always tell people it's spelled just like Bernie with Bernie Sanders, except I'm not Sanders. But it's Bernie@careercompassllc.com, or I'm on social media. You can go to my website, which is careercompassllc.com, and click on the contact section and send me a message, and I'd be more than happy to have a discussion. I do offer a free 30-minute discussion with potential clients just to learn a little bit more about their situation, what they're trying to do, and share about my services, and we can see if there's a match.
So I will grab that slide deck from you today. We'll get it out to all the participants. Thank you so much for your time today and your wisdom. It's really valuable to hear this and for you to share it with us, so thank you. And I, of course, want to thank our sponsors, Citi and Daugherty Business Solutions as well, for making this possible. If you have any other further questions, you can email me again at matthewk@focus-stl.org, and I will get them on to Bernie and we'll get them answered. Thank you, Bernie. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Please
good luck.
stay tuned to our website for more events coming up through Focus, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.